Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into a topic you all were really curious about, using humor in video marketing. You want to make them laugh, but, still keep it professional.
It's a tricky balance to strike.
It is. And that's exactly what we're going to explore today. Our main source is this article, The Role of Humor in Video Marketing, which is packed with insights.
It really is. And it kind of starts with why humor works so well in the first place. I mean, we've all seen those ads that just stick with us because they're funny. But what's the psychology behind that?
Right. It's more than just a chuckle, right? There's got to be something deeper going on.
There is. Think about it. When we laugh...
1 nerd, 2 nerds, 3 nerds, 4 marketing nerds do so much more. Over hill and high where the nerd buggies go. Come along to bring you the Marketing Nerd Show. La 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 la.
These goddamn marketers! Why do they hook me in then cut off the conversation with this stupid intro?
Welcome to the Marketing Nerds podcast. I'm your host, Noah Grant.
And I'm Ellie Marks. This is an awesome topic I really want to discuss.
Using humor in video marketing. You want to make them laugh, but, still keep it professional.
It's a tricky balance to strike.
It is. We're going to talk about this blog post, the source of our topic, from marketingnerds.ai. It's called Role of Humor in Video Marketing, which is packed with insights. We'll put a link to it in the show notes, or you can get in touch with Brian at marketingnerds.ai to send you the link so you can check it out.
And it kind of starts with why humor works so well in the first place. I mean, we've all seen those ads that just stick with us because they're funny. But what's the psychology behind that?
Right. It's more than just a chuckle, right? There's got to be something deeper going on.
There is. Think about it. When we laugh, we feel good. And that positive feeling gets linked to the brand that made us laugh.
Oh, so it builds trust and connection.
Exactly. It makes you remember them, even in a world where you're bombarded with a million ads every day.
It makes them stand out for sure. But I imagine not all humor is created equal, is it? What works for one audience might not land with another.
You're absolutely right. Understanding your audience is key. The source even mentions using AI to see what kind of humor your audience already enjoys online.
Wow, using AI for comedy. But even if you know your audience, how do you make sure the humor actually connects with your brand and message? You can't just throw in random funny stuff, right?
No, definitely not. The humor has to work with the message, enhance it. The source had this example, a cleaning product company. Imagine they show all these relatable cleaning fails, but then their product swoops in to save the day.
I love that. We get you. Cleaning can be a disaster, but we're here to help.
Exactly. Funny, relatable, and it ties directly back to the product. Speaking of different types of humor, the source mentioned a few, right? Playful, satirical, self-deprecating. I'm curious to dive into those a bit more.
Me too. What about playful humor? Who does that work well for?
Playful humor is great for brands with that, a naturally fun vibe. Think snack food companies, travel agencies, even tech companies trying to be less intimidating. Bright colors, silly situations, maybe a pun or two.
Light and fun. Got it. What about satire? Seems riskier.
It can be. Satire works best when you have a savvy audience, people who get social commentary and sharp wit.
Like maybe those news satire shows or some tech companies poking fun at themselves.
Yeah, exactly. But the source also emphasizes knowing your audience, because satire can be polarizing. You got to be aware of cultural sensitivities.
Makes sense. You got to be smart and insightful, not just funny. Okay, what about self-deprecating humor? It seems like everyone's doing that now.
For good reason. When a brand can poke fun at itself, it becomes more human, more relatable. Those ads where companies laugh at their past mistakes.
It's disarming. Shows they don't take themselves too seriously. But how do you make sure it doesn't, damage your credibility?
That's a great question. And it all comes back to balance. You want to be funny, but not undermine the trust you've built. There's an interesting example in the source about a financial services company that did this really well.
Oh, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
They made videos showing these relatable money mishaps, overdrafting, losing your wallet. But then they transitioned to a message about how their expertise could help people avoid those situations.
So they use humor to acknowledge the struggle, but then offered a solution, reestablishing their credibility.
Exactly. Funny and professional at the same time. And speaking of timing, that plays a huge role in humor too.
Timing is everything in comedy. Think about those stand-up comedians. The best ones, they just know when to pause, when to speed up.
Exactly. Same with video marketing. Where you place the humor in your video matters. A joke at the start to grab attention, maybe sprinkle in some lighter moments to keep people engaged, but it can't overshadow the message.
So finding the right balance is key.
It is, and I think that's where careful planning and knowing your audience really come in. You got to think about the whole story of your video and where the humor fits best.
Like to introduce a problem,
Yeah.
or maybe lighten the mood after a more technical part.
Precisely. It's about making the whole experience engaging and memorable.
This makes me think about the whole editing process. The source mentioned using AI for that too. Right?
Yes, and it's fascinating. These AI editing tools can analyze comedic timing, see what's landing well, even suggest ways to improve.
Wow. Like having an AI comedy coach. But even with the best tools and intentions, how do you really know if your humor is working? You don't want to be the only one laughing at your own jokes.
That's a great point and leads us to the next crucial step.
Hey, it's a ghost town out there. You're struggling to grow your business. Let us introduce you to marketingnerds.ai, the ultimate resource for smarter, faster marketing. Whether you want to learn at your own pace with our online courses or just hand it off and hire us, we've got you covered. We're experts in video production marketing, AI-powered strategies, and automation. All designed to help you scale your business without the headaches. We know marketing, we know video, and we definitely know AI. Why not let us help you work smarter, not harder?
Welcome back. We were talking about how you figure out if your jokes are actually landing the way you want them to.
Like not just making yourself laugh in the editing room.
Exactly. The source talks about focus groups, which are super valuable.
And basically showing your video to a group of people who are like your target audience and seeing how they react.
Exactly. You can observe their facial expressions, body language, even have them fill out surveys afterwards, see what works, what doesn't, really understand why.
That makes sense. But what if, focus groups aren't really an option? Are there other ways to test the humor?
Absolutely. Online surveys can be really useful. There are platforms like SurveyMonkey or even Google Forms. You can just whip up a quick survey to get feedback from a wider range of people.
What about those engagement metrics? Those seem like a pretty straightforward way to see what's resonating.
Yeah. Look at things like watch time, shares, comments, even click-through rates. If people are watching all the way through, sharing with their friends, clicking your call to action, that's a good sign.
It shows they're into it.
Right. And here's where AI can be really interesting. AI analytics tools can look at all that data and help you figure out what kind of humor is working best for your target audience.
Almost like an AI comedian sidekick crunching the numbers.
Yeah, exactly. So you've got focus groups, surveys, engagement metrics, and AI analytics. It's a whole toolkit for figuring out if your humor is hitting the mark.
That's super helpful. But I also want to hear about brands that are already doing this well. The source talked about that Old Spice campaign, the man your man could smell like. What made that so successful?
Well, first of all, it was totally unexpected, right? Old Spice, this masculine brand, suddenly embraces this over-the-top, quirky style of comedy.
Oh, yeah. I remember it. It was so different from everything else out there.
And it blew up. People loved it. It was so absurd. That guy, shirtless, on a horse, going from a shower to a sailboat, all with a straight face.
But it's still focused on the product somehow. They made smelling good look adventurous, almost magical. Haha.
Exactly. And that's the key. The humor always served the brand and the message. It wasn't random. It was carefully crafted.
So many brands miss that, though. They try to be funny, but it doesn't really connect to anything.
Right. It's like a joke that has nothing to do with the conversation. You might chuckle, but you won't remember it. What else did we learn from the Old Spice campaign? I think authenticity is a big one. The humor felt real, self-aware.
It didn't feel forced, like they were just being themselves.
Which is hard to fake, People can tell when it's not genuine.
So how do brands cultivate that authenticity? Is it something you can even force?
I think it's a mix of things. You got to understand your brand's personality. What are your values? What makes you unique? How do you talk to people?
And once you know that, you can figure out how to use humor to express it.
Yeah, exactly. Find the type of humor that feels natural for your brand. If you're playful and quirky, go for it. But if you're more serious, maybe tone it down a bit.
It's like you wouldn't expect a law firm to have the same sense of humor as, a candy company.
Right. The key is finding the right fit for your brand and your audience. And remember, it doesn't always have to be laugh out loud funny.
Sometimes it's just about creating a positive vibe.
Yeah. A feeling of connection. Now, we've talked about the good stuff, but let's be real, there are some pitfalls to avoid. Like being tone deaf, that can be a brand killer.
Yeah, especially these days, you got to be so careful about cultural differences, social issues, anything that could be offensive.
It's not always easy to anticipate everything, but having a diverse team helps. People with different perspectives who can catch those blind spots.
And being open to feedback, even if it's tough to hear.
Absolutely. Another trap is overusing humor. Little goes a long way, too much, and your brand might start to seem less credible.
It's about finding that balance, right?
Yeah.
Being funny, but also taking your business seriously.
Exactly. And even when you're being funny, clarity is important. People should still understand what your brand is about, what you offer.
They should get the message, even if they're laughing along the way.
Right. Actually, this is making me think, what's the most memorable funny ad you've seen lately? The one that really stuck with you?
Good question. There was this ad for a language learning app, and it showed all these scenarios of people, trying to speak different languages and totally messing up.
Oh, I think I know the one. Like, what kind of scenarios?
Well, there's this guy trying to order food in Italy, and he accidentally asked for tires instead of pasta. I've totally been there, butchering another language.
So relatable. It's the universal language of miscommunication.
Yeah. It was funny because it was so true. Lighthearted, self-deprecating, and it made me remember that app. The next time I thought about learning Spanish, boom, that ad popped in my head.
See, that's humor working its magic, creating a positive association with the brand.
More than just a laugh, it's about creating a connection that actually leads to results.
Exactly. So we've talked about why humor works, the importance of authenticity, the pitfalls to avoid. But where do you even begin when it comes to actually creating humorous video content?
Right, like where do the ideas come from?
Well, it goes back to knowing your audience, like we said before. What kind of humor do they like? What are their interests, their values? What are their pain points?
Because a joke that works for a teenager might not work for, someone's grandma.
Exactly. Once you have that understanding, you can start brainstorming, be creative, think outside the box, try different types of humor, different formats. Don't be afraid to be silly.
Sometimes the silliest ideas are the best ones.
I agree. And you don't have to be a professional comedian to come up with something funny. Real people sharing real experiences can be super effective.
Like a customer testimonial where someone tells a funny story about your product. That kind of thing is gold.
It's all about finding those moments of genuine humor that connect with people on a human level. Now, once you have some ideas, how do you actually write the script?
Yeah, how do you structure it?
Well, it's like any other video script. You need a strong hook that grabs people's attention, then you introduce your product or service, and you end with a call to action. But the humor should be woven throughout.
It can't feel forced.
Right, it has to flow naturally, and this is where comedic timing is so important. Making sure the jokes are paced well, the punchlines land at the right moment.
It's like a rhythm.
Exactly. And it's not always about big, obvious jokes. Sometimes just a subtle wit or a playful tone can be just as effective.
It's about creating a fun, enjoyable experience for the viewer.
Right. And once you have your script, it's time to move on to production. That's where things get really interesting.
So many possibilities.
You can use animation, live action, stop motion, special effects. The sky's the limit.
It all depends on your budget, your audience, and the tone you're going for.
Exactly. If you're targeting a younger audience, you might want something fast-paced and visual, like a TikTok video or an Instagram reel.
But for a more mature audience, maybe something more traditional, like a commercial or a documentary-style video.
The key is to choose a format that will showcase your humor in the best possible light. Oh, and don't forget about sound design and music.
Yeah, music can totally make or break a joke.
Totally. And sound effects, too. Think about those old sitcoms. They always used exaggerated sound effects to make the jokes funnier.
Like the slide whistle sound when someone slips on a banana peel.
Exactly. Little things like that can make a big difference. And speaking of things that make a difference, let's talk about editing. A good editor can really elevate a humorous video.
Tighten up the pacing, add some cool transitions, make sure the jokes land just right.
Right. And as we mentioned before, there are even AI-powered editing tools now that can analyze your footage and help you find the funniest moments, even suggest how to improve the timing.
It's like having a comedy editor in your pocket.
Pretty much. So we've covered the creative side. But what about the practical stuff? How much does it cost to make one of these funny videos?
Yeah, that's a good question. It probably varies a lot, right?
It does. It depends on things like how long the video is, how complex the production is, who you hire. If you're bringing in a big-name comedian, it's going to cost more than if you're using your own employees or amateur actors. But you can still create great, funny content on a budget.
You can get creative with stock footage, DIY animation, even just film something on your phone.
It's all about having a clear vision and a good story. Don't be afraid to get scrappy.
Sometimes the best stuff comes from those low-budget solutions.
Totally. It's about focusing on the content and the message. If the idea is strong and you execute it well, it doesn't matter how much you spend, people will connect with it. Speaking of connecting, how do you actually measure the success of these videos? How do you know they're working?
Yeah, it's not as simple as just counting views, is it?
Right. Views and likes are important, but it's harder to measure how humor affects things like brand perception or purchasing decisions.
Like, just because someone laughed doesn't mean they'll buy your product.
Exactly. So how do we measure the effectiveness of humor? Well, traditional metrics like views, engagement, and shares are still useful. They tell you how many people are seeing your video and how they're interacting with it.
If you see a spike in engagement after you release a funny video, that's a pretty good sign.
For sure. Another thing you can do is use surveys and focus groups to get feedback directly from your audience. Ask things like, did you find this video funny? Did it make you think differently about our brand?
Getting those real opinions.
Exactly. It helps you figure out what's working, what's not. And then there's the bottom line, sales and conversions. If you notice a bump in sales after you launch a humorous campaign, that's a pretty good indicator that the humor is doing its job.
Like proof that laughter can lead to profits.
Right. Of course, it's important to remember that correlation doesn't always equal causation. There could be other things going on. But if you consistently see that increase after releasing humorous content, it's a good sign.
It's all about connecting the dots.
Exactly. It's a bit of an art and a science. You need the numbers and the qualitative feedback to get the full picture.
And being open to trying different things, seeing what works for your brand and your audience.
Absolutely. Experimentation is key. Now, before we move on, remember what we talked about earlier about AI-generated humor? It's pretty mind-blowing, right?
Oh yeah, AI creating jokes. That's a whole other conversation.
It is. Imagine an AI that could analyze your sense of humor and tailor jokes just for you. It could be incredibly sophisticated and personalized.
But where does that leave human comedians? What happens if AI starts writing funnier material?
Those are the questions we need to start thinking about. It's a whole new world of humor.
And there are ethical considerations too, right?
Definitely. We have to be careful about AI perpetuating stereotypes or creating humor that's offensive. It's a powerful tool, and we need to use it responsibly.
Technology always has those two sides, doesn't it? The potential for good and for bad.
It does. And it's up to us to guide it in the right direction.
That's a great point. So we've talked about the science, the art, the tools, the potential pitfalls. What are your final thoughts on humor and video marketing?
My final thought is have fun, experiment, be playful, and don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Humor should be enjoyable, right? Both for the creators and the audience.
Exactly. So go out there and make people laugh. But do it thoughtfully, authentically, and with a clear understanding of your brand and your audience.
Great advice. This has been a fascinating look at humor in video marketing. We've learned so much and hopefully had a few laughs along the way.
Definitely. We'll see you on the next deep dive.
Welcome back to our final look at humor in video marketing.
It's been a fun one. So much to unpack about how humor can really, take your marketing to the next level.
And I think the big takeaway is it really can work. When it's done well, it creates that connection, makes your brand memorable.
And ultimately helps you, reach your business goals.
Absolutely. But it's definitely more than just telling a few jokes and calling it a day.
Right. You need a plan. You need to know your audience really well and be open to testing things out, finding your style.
And remember, not everyone finds the same things funny. What works for one person might not work for another.
Yeah, you got to be sensitive to different cultures, different backgrounds. You don't want to alienate anyone.
Exactly. You want to be inclusive with your humor, bring people together. I think it's interesting to think about the different ways you can use humor. It's not just about getting laughs for the sake of it.
It's a tool. It can help you achieve different things.
Like what?
Well, think about brand awareness. A funny video that goes viral. That can introduce so many people to your brand, people they might have never even heard of otherwise.
It puts you on the map.
Right. And not just that, it can help people like your brand more, make you seem, less corporate, more human.
More relatable.
Exactly. People connect with that. And don't forget about, driving traffic to your website. A funny video might make people curious enough to click and learn more.
Like they just have to see what you're all about.
Right. And of course, humor can be a powerful way to get people interested in your product or service and ultimately, drive those sales.
Make them want to buy what you're selling.
Exactly. It's about making it entertaining and informative. So they're laughing, but they're also getting the message. Before we wrap up, I think it's so important to emphasize how crucial originality is.
Especially now when there's so much content out there. You got to stand out.
You do. And humor can be a great way to do that. If it's fresh, unexpected.
People are tired of the same old jokes.
Exactly. So where do you find those fresh ideas? I think it comes from paying attention, noticing the funny things in everyday life.
Finding the humor in the little things,
Yeah, those relatable moments, the things everyone's experienced. And don't be afraid to get a little weird, try different things.
Experiment.
Yes. You never know what's going to resonate. The important thing is that you're having fun making it and that your audience enjoys watching it.
That's what it's all about. Joy, connection, surprise.
Well said.
So, to sum it all up, humor can be an amazing tool for video marketers. But you have to be thoughtful, you have to know your audience, and you got to be willing to try new things.
And most importantly, don't take yourself too seriously. Have fun with it. Authenticity shines through.
Great advice. Thanks for joining us on this edition of the Marketing Nerds podcast. Hopefully you were able to learn some new things and maybe laugh along the way.
Definitely. Until next time.
Keep it funny. Don't forget to keep the conversation going and stay up to date on all that we do at marketingnerds.ai.